Hey everyone, and welcome back. Today I'm going to talk about a classic horror movie remake, The Blob. I hope you enjoy the video, and let's dive in this muck. The film opens and we see typical small town Arborville, California. The streets are eerily quiet. Well, it turns out the entire town is just enjoying the local high school football game. Paul Taylor, one of the players, seems to have the hots for a cheerleader named Meg Penny. His friend Scott tells him to ask her out, but Paul seems a tad hesitant. Paul catches a nice pass but is put through a table. However, Meg comes over, giving Paul the perfect opportunity to ask her out. He does, but also passes out from the tackle. Meanwhile, we meet bad boy Brian Flagg. You know he's no good because he wears leather, smokes, and rides a motorcycle. He's going to jump his bike over a broken bridge, but doesn't quite make it. Sheriff Herb Geller is at the local diner and tries asking Fran Hewitt, a waitress, out. It looks like he's struck out, however she leaves a little note on his bill. Sheriff Hewitt pulls up next to Brian and it looks like he's turning 18 soon, so no more juvie for him. It's the big times from here on out. Brian enters the local mechanic shop asking the owner Moss if he can borrow his ratchet set to fix his bike. Brian promises to help him in the shop and Moss lets him borrow a set. An old homeless man is crushing cans when his dog is alerted to something. There's something in the sky headed towards them. A meteorite goes soaring by the man and his dog, crashing and exploding. Paul is with his friend Scott, who are at the local pharmacy. Scott asks Paul for some money so he can buy some protection as he thinks he's getting lucky tonight. Scott goes to buy some, but the local priest runs into him and says he hasn't seen him in some time. The pharmacist comes back with his protection, making an all too awkward scene, so he just says they're for Paul. The old man goes to the crash site with a hatchet. There's something bubbling from within the meteor. Suddenly it latches onto his arm. We meet Meg's brother Kevin and his friend. They're going to go see some R-rated horror film and his mother does not approve. Paul is at the door ready to pick up Meg for their date. Her mother comes to the door inviting the boy in. Her son is leaving to his friend's house and she won't let him go without his jacket, which gets stuck when zipping up. Meg comes downstairs and tells Paul she just wants him to meet her father before they leave. And her father turns out to be the pharmacist. Brian is fixing his bike out in the woods. He hears a strange noise and turns on the light. The old man suddenly appears with that blob stuck on his arm. He runs and Brian chases after him. Meg and Paul are driving and laughing about the misunderstanding they just had with her father. The old man comes running out in front of their car and they hit him. Brian comes out and tells them to be careful as he has some corrosive thing on his hand. They're going to bring the old man to the hospital. Paul tells Brian he's coming too as he's also involved in this, and the two boys definitely don't like one another. They bring the old man to the hospital and he's wheeled off to room 3. Brian leaves saying if you need me, you know where to find me. Paul goes to the vending machine to get Meg a drink and notices something odd with the old man. His eyes are completely white and there's something in his throat. He comes back with the doctor and they find the old man missing the bottom half of his body. Paul runs to make a call to the sheriff and the door moves behind him with the blob moving up the wall. Paul looks up as the blob drops down on him. His scream alerts Meg, who rushes over. She finds Paul being completely devoured by the thing. Her parents pick her up and she tells them she saw it kill Paul. Whatever this thing is has disappeared. The sheriff is going to go find whoever did this to Paul. Scott is out in the woods with the girl he thinks he's going to get lucky with. He opens his trunk to make her another one of his special drinks, but I think she's had enough already. We see something in the grass moving towards the car. Scott returns finding his date passed out. He decides to get a little handsy and the blob doesn't take too kindly to predators. Meg's mother comes in her room to see how she's doing, but no one believes what she said happened. We see the blob as it climbs into the sewer heading towards the town. Meg finds Brian and she needs to talk, however he doesn't care. He goes into the local diner and asks Fran for a sandwich. Meg follows as she's very persistent. She tells him whatever killed the old man also killed Paul and it's getting bigger. Brian thinks she's onto something. The sheriff remembers his note from Fran and heads off to the diner. Fran is in the kitchen and notices a strange bubbling coming from the sink. She grabs a plunger, but the cook takes over for her. He gives it his best, but nothing happens. So he decides to reach in with his hand. He pulls out some kind of slime and the blob attacks, pulling him in the drain. Fran returns screaming, which alerts Brian and Meg. The man is sucked completely into the drain. The blob comes rushing out, chasing Brian and Meg. They run and hide in the freezer. It starts breaking its way inside, but backtracks as it doesn't like the cold. Meanwhile, Fran makes her way to a payphone to call for help. The blob surrounds the payphone, trapping Fran inside. She calls the sheriff's department asking for Herb and is told he went down to the diner. Suddenly Herb appears in the blob as it had already got to him. It breaks its way inside, killing Fran as well. Brian and Meg leave the freezer looking for Fran. We see the priest from earlier is walking along the street and watches as the blob enters the sewers. He goes inside the diner where he finds frozen pieces of the blob in the freezer. He takes a few, placing them inside a glass container. Meg and Brian arrive at the sheriff's station, but the receptionist can't find anyone. She says last she heard the deputy was up at the farm. Brian and Meg head there as that's where the blob was first encountered. They arrive finding the cop car, but no sign of the deputy. A bright light shines through the trees and they're stopped by a biological containment team. The deputy appears, surprisingly not dead, and he's helping the containment team. Dr. Meadows explains he believes this to be what killed the dinosaurs and has been preparing for it all his life. Kevin and his friend are at the movie he told his mother they definitely were not going to see. The projectionist checks a vent as the AC seems to have stopped, and well, things go about how you would expect. An usher comes in looking for him, finding him being devoured on the ceiling. Meanwhile, Meg and Brian are forced into a van as the town is being put on quarantine. Brian doesn't trust them and unlocks the door using the ratchet set. Meg stays as she believes they're just trying to help. She finds her parents at the town hall as the town are all being quarantined there. Meg runs off to find her brother who could be in trouble. Back at the movie, and Kevin turns around to see an annoying moviegoer get snatched up by the blob. Everyone freaks out as it oozes from the screen. Meg arrives as everyone is in full-on panic. The blob is devouring everyone in the theater. Meg finds the boys and the blob chases them. Kevin's jacket gets caught in the door and that damn zipper is stuck. They manage to rip the jacket off him just in time though. Unfortunately, they're trapped in a dead end. However, they find a manhole and head down into the sewer. Brian is sneaking around the military and we learn this wasn't alien, but a man-made viral bioweapon that mutated while orbiting space. They get a report the blob chased some people into the sewers and Meadows wants it alive. The people, however, are expendable. Brian is found but hits the man with a socket wrench and runs off. Brian gets on his bike with the team on his tail shooting at him. He makes a mad dash for the bridge and nails the jump this time. Meg and the boys are wandering the sewer when the military forces enter. The blob suddenly appears and Meg and the boys run towards some pipes. She starts hoisting her brother up, but his friend is taken by the blob. The blob is right beneath him as they climb the pipes. The military arrive, giving a slight distraction. Meg is too big to fit through the grates, so she tells her brother to run. Meg falls, but finds another way up. Brian finds her and they escape on his motorcycle. Well, that is until he dumps it. They find a soldier that leads them to a way up and out, but Meadows tells his men to close it as they need to contain this thing. A truck is placed over top so they can't open it. Luckily, the soldier just happened to be carrying a rocket launcher, so Brian fires it, one-handed no less, giving them an escape. Brian grabs a gun, saying they're lying. The deputy tells him to put it down, but the soldiers also pull theirs. Brian tells the deputy this was man-made and they're here to cover it up. Meadows is about to shoot, but the blob grabs him, pulling him into the sewer. The military drops in a bomb to blow it up, but I think all that did was piss it off. The blob is killing people left and right. The military try a flamethrower, but that just blows up in their face. Brian comes busting out of the mechanic shop with a snowmaker truck. The blob grabs the deputy and folds him right in half. Brian arrives and starts spraying the blob with the snow. He stupidly charges the thing, flipping the truck in the process. Meg runs out to help Brian, who's stuck in the truck. She grabs a gun and bomb off a dead soldier. This cheerleader, somehow knowing how to fire a rifle, gets its attention. She arms the bomb and goes to jump, but her foot gets caught. Brian breaks out of the truck and grabs Meg just in time. The bomb explodes, completely freezing the blob. Moss says they need to get this thing to the ice house before dawn. Sometime later, we see a tent out in a field. The priest is giving a fire and brimstone type sermon to a bunch of terrified followers. A woman comes to the back asking how far off the day of reckoning is. He says soon, madam, as he pulls up the glass jar with the blob, saying the Lord will give me a sign as the film comes to an end. Hey, I hope you enjoyed our little look at the blob. If you could like the video and subscribe, I would really appreciate it. Thank you all for watching and take care.